now. And then I know we're a small group today, so we can have a good conversation, but we want to welcome Mallory. So I'll take a couple minutes and just introduce Mallory today. So she is Mallory attended Villanova University. She's also a dear friend of mine. I'll preface with that. But at Villanova, she earned a Bachelor of Arts in Economics with a minor in business. She fully immersed herself onto the campus through study abroad programs, club sports teams, Greek life, and service and justice experiences. Her interests in creative writing and film sparked opportunities in marketing, videography, and production. And as a student, she was a producer of the film From the Ground Up, a documentary that we're going to get to check out today. But it was designed to spread awareness about the clean water crisis in Tanzania, East Africa. Mallory has followed her passion for media and production post-graduation, and she is currently the marketing coordinator in client partnerships at NBC, which is a recent promotion for her. So congratulations, Mallory. And thank you so much for being here today. I don't know if you have any other introductory remarks.
No, that was perfect. That was a very warm welcome. I do appreciate it. Yeah, Ellen and I have known each other for a very long time. She's the captain on my soccer team when I was in high school, and we worked together for like a million years at the Hall of Fame. So it's very, very nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Full circle. So before we talk about NBC or the film, maybe just take us back and let's talk a little bit about your high school days and your college search. So when you were thinking about a college search, what factors were most important to you when selecting a college?
Yeah, so specifically in high school, as I said, we played soccer. I was very involved in sports, and that was something that I liked about it. We went to a very small school, so there was a lot of like a community element where, the whole town would come and show up for a basketball game or something along those lines. And I like that. I like that there was that, vibe of like, oh, I'm a part of this big crowd and I'm going crazy, even though in hindsight, the crowds were pretty small. But so before I went to college, I definitely took into account what it was that I really enjoyed about high school, what it is I kind of didn't enjoy, and then made a pretty detailed list of like things that I definitely needed, things that I would like to have, and then kind of just measured those up against the schools I was applying to. So one of the things that I said was a must have was a sports element to the school, like a good sports team. So like there are a lot of big football schools. Villanova is a huge basketball school. The year I was applying, actually they won the national championship, so there was a lot of this big fan base kind of freaking out, and everyone felt kind of a part of something, and I was really drawn to that. Another thing was I wanted it to be kind of close to home, that I could come home if I wanted to, but not close enough that I'd be home every weekend, that I was feeling homesick. I kind of wanted to push that boundary for myself. And in addition to that, I kind of did want some sort of sense of community. And now I can't walk past anyone without Villanova shirt without them being like, go Cats, go Nova, and that was something that I was incredibly drawn to. And those were kind of my musts. Things that I kind of missed on. I did want to be in a city because I did grow up in a small town for so long. Villanova is not directly in a city. It's about 20 minutes outside. And I kind of compromised on that because it wasn't one of my can't miss items. So I think definitely my advice for that would, one, just have a list of things that you definitely need. And in addition to that, be willing to kind of push yourself out there, try new things. And then maybe when you get to college, I notice a lot of people right now are switching colleges pretty quickly or switching majors pretty quickly. Kind of just be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable and push yourself in those first couple of months when you do get to a new place, because it can be scary, can be, a little homesicky, but for the most part, kind of try and push yourself a little bit. I know I definitely had to, and I was very happy with my decision.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, I think those first couple of weeks, it's a huge transition no matter where you go to college. So I think that's some great advice in terms of, giving yourself a chance to, be in a new environment before switching a major or transferring or something like that.
Absolutely.
So Mel, we mentioned earlier you were very involved on campus. How did participating in extracurriculars or student organizations influence your college experience?
Yeah, so I think it definitely made it what it was. As you talked about and as we'll get into later, I was definitely a business oriented student. I was in the College of Liberal Arts, but I was an economics major, and I had a business minor. But I had a lot of interests elsewhere. So I really wanted to travel. I did want to get into film and media. As you mentioned, I liked creative writing. So I think what I did was they had a ton of like fairs and like I mean activity fairs, new student orientation fairs, like all sorts of fairs where people were coming out to kind of tell you, hey, you could get involved in this. And I dove headfirst. I put my email down on every single one of those. I wanted to know everything that was going on campus, and I made sure that, you know, if there was something that I even kind of had a remote interest in, I would try it just to see if I could see myself in there. And I think being willing to do that and try something new, I literally played Quidditch for a semester. I was I was playing Quidditch, and I got tackled by a man who was, no joke, 6'7" or something absurd, tallest man I've ever seen in my life. Got tackled by him. I said, you know what, this sport was great. I'm gonna have to hang up my broomstick. I'm done with this. But for the most part, you know, I really tried to put myself out there and see those different things. And through that, I joined the club basketball team, and I now currently live with the girl that I met within the first couple of weeks of freshman year because we were playing this sport together. And I do think that it helps broaden, maybe even if your area of study isn't necessarily where you want to spend all your time, it gives you the chance to kind of see what you're like even in hobby wise, or maybe you find somehow that that is the career. Like now I'm working in media, but I'm not really even touching economics at this point, but here I was, you know, trying these different classes, seeing these different opportunities. And I think that it really did shape who I even came out to be post grad, and the friends that I made, and really broadened who I am as a person, I would argue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think too many people can say that they played competitive Quidditch. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
true.
Um, so kind of a follow-up to that, you know, I know you mentioned um, activity fairs or clubs and organization fairs, opportunities where you can walk into a space and talk to numerous different people and find out about a lot of different opportunities at once. Would you say there were other resources that were helpful in finding opportunities to get involved?
Yes. So, and you know what? Some of them I'll even say that I underutilized. My campus had a career fair. They had an office of student life. They had an office specifically for Greek life. Even there are tons of offices, and typically, my understanding of at most campuses is there's even sometimes a building dedicated to, you know, where you can find all of these offices for student life and student organizations. And obviously, even in this day and age, usually they have social media pages or like online resources as well. And diving into those resources, kind of getting to know a little bit more about what your campus has to offer can be incredibly helpful. Especially finding those kind of like niche interests that maybe you're not hearing all about. Like you'll probably hear of some bigger clubs that a lot of people are going out for, but definitely don't be afraid to apply and join, or even create your own club that you have an interest in, because college is a whole new group of people that are willing to do things that maybe you didn't have the people for in high school or before that. So definitely look into that. And again, if you don't see it, see if maybe there's a way for you to start your own. Because I know a couple of friends who started like an astrology club and stuff like that on Villanova's campus. So definitely look into those offices for student resources for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And so I know we've sort of woven this through the last few questions, but can you talk a little bit about your transition from a very business oriented degree path to your current interest now in media and production, or maybe how those two interests have sort of intertwined throughout the years?
Absolutely. So I'm taking economics classes, and I'm kind of going into, because at the time, full transparency, you know, when I was picturing what I was going to do, I just knew that I wanted to make money somehow. And I think a lot of times, especially in high school, the way that you picture that is by becoming somebody who's working in business and doing a business oriented career, or at least that was my perspective at the time. So I went in undecided, but I was pretty sure I was going to be an economics major. I kind of declared pretty quickly, which, as a side note, I would offer that as advice as well. If you don't have to declare and you don't know what you want to do yet, definitely take the first couple of semesters to be undecided. That's a perfectly acceptable thing to do at most schools. And I think it would have helped me a lot more if I had just waited another semester. But regardless, circling back to the point, so I started to realize like through these classes that I could take electives that were a little bit more creative, which is what I was kind of missing. I wanted that creative side of business. So I started taking some marketing classes, and here I was coming up with marketing strategies and getting to create like ads, even through Photoshop, and learning how to work Photoshop and what people respond to on different apps like Snapchat versus Facebook versus all of that. And I noticed that I was kind of liking that. I liked that it was still business, but also a little creative. And then I started looking into, I knew that I really loved, this is going to sound silly, but I loved NBC as a whole because I used to watch NBC television all the time with my parents. I was like, SNL is the funniest show I've ever seen in my life. I love Law and Order, all of those things. So I had said I would love to work for NBC, but where do I fit into that picture? So then I started looking into media opportunities on Villanova's campus and came across this documentary program where every year they go to a different, well, barring last year, of course, because of COVID, they couldn't go anywhere, but they go to a different location every year and film on a different social justice issue. So I'm looking into this program, and that's amazing. That's a lot of experience in film. And I'm like, okay, well, how am I going to apply myself to this? And they have producers. And I learned very quickly that in any objective, any goal that you have, any business you have needs some element of, how are we going to fund this? How are we going to get people to view this film eventually? How are we going to even, promote it in any way, shape, or form? And what are the social medias going to look like? And so I found myself in a place where I was able to take this major that I have and these classes that I've taken and these electives that I've pursued, and then apply them to this passion that I have and kind of figure out a way for post-grad what that might look like for me. So now I'm a coordinator at NBC. We work with clients, we work with marketing strategy all of the time. And I wouldn't have gotten that if I didn't kind of take that leap into, I have this interest, I have this major, how do we put these two things together?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, ideally finding ways to merge interests and what you're studying and find those pockets of, like you said, you knew you always wanted to be working at NBC. That was a passion of yours. So just figuring out, okay, where do my interests fit into it rather than kind of just jumping at any opportunity. I think that's cool that you kind of found your path there.
Absolutely.
So how has your personal experiences or maybe your identity influenced your career interests?
Absolutely. So like I said, I had always wanted to work for NBC. And I think one of the most important things that I did, and it's a cliche, but it is true. There's always the saying, like, it's not what you know, it's who you know kind of thing. So I kind of made a point to find people who knew about this field that I was now trying to enter, this media field. And we ended up having programs on Villanova's campus in many ways. And as I said, like, the Career Center is amazing. I didn't use it as often as I should. I can't even recommend enough, like, use the Career Center, they will help you. But in addition to that, finding people, like, for instance, the professor of this documentary class, he has connections everywhere. He went to film school in California, he's very well connected, and he just wanted to help me as well. Okay, great. Like, him and I are connected. Going to school funded trips to market yourself, to network. Amazing, great. Those are things that I'm capable of doing. I'm able to put myself out there and take that leap to meet people who are willing to advocate for me. And sometimes networking events can be a little bit nerve-wracking because here you are just kind of in a weird situation where you're like, oh, my name is Mallory and I have this interest. But I promise if you get over the initial, like, awkwardness or, like, nervousness of the scenario, a lot of times people really are just there to help you out in some way, help you enter this field that they know something about that you don't. Again, if anybody is interested in media, has any questions for me at all, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on also social channels, but LinkedIn specifically, if you have one, feel free to connect with me, because again, I'm willing to help out. Like, that's just my interest at this point, to give somebody else this opportunity to enter a field such as media. However, anyways, circling back. So yeah, I ended up even just going to dinner with one of my friend's moms. And it turned out down the line that she would end up working for NBC, and we had stayed connected this whole time. And now we literally work together. So again, just kind of taking the opportunity where if you hear somebody is doing what you're interested in doing, just being willing to pick their brain, being willing to say, hey, can I talk to you at some other point about this? Hey, I have an interview coming up. Would you mind if I run some questions by you? And 9 out of 10 times, they're going to say yes and be willing to help you in that way. So that I would say is probably my best advice on that scenario and how that all impacted me.
Yeah, thank you. And I like how you touch on like networking can happen in so many different spaces, both formally and informally, and right down to dinner with someone's mom.
Absolutely.
So that's pretty cool in terms of building connections and, you know, finding people that are willing to advocate, willing to ask, answer questions, or connect in that way.
Yes.
So before showing the film, I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but maybe just giving us a little bit of a background on Glass Rose Films and kind of the mission behind this particular documentary short. And maybe what is a documentary short?
Okay, we'll start there. So this is an entirely student produced film for the most part. We do have an executive producer, our professor Hezekiah Lewis, and he's a professor at Villanova who has connections everywhere, like I said. So every year he has a different place in mind and a different story structure. And for our year, we went to Tanzania to document the global water crisis. And we ended up going for 2 weeks. Actually, this is the 2-year anniversary since we went and started filming. And we filmed in several locations, Arusha, and then 2 communities, one Malolo, one Jamita. And we just learned, we interviewed people, we did a bunch of different styles, and you will see when you watch the film that we chose kind of an artistic style to tell the story, but we tried all different things, because when you're there and you only have 2 weeks, you know, you don't really know how the story's going to play out. Obviously, this is not your story to tell. So you're kind of just filming and getting as much footage as you can, because you can't come back, you can't revisit it and say, oh, I missed a shot. You know, it's all in the moment. And we're here, we have a short documentary is under 20 minutes, at least for if you're planning on putting them into film festivals. So you have a very limited amount of time to talk about this very serious issue. Again, for us, it was the global water crisis. So we also do have social channels. Again, shameless plug, please feel free to follow Glass Rose Films on Instagram and or Facebook or YouTube. Really, we have it all. But essentially we had all the equipment ourselves. We filmed it. We had student directors filming it. I was one of the producers. We had multimedia producers. We had writers. We had anything you can possibly imagine in a full-blown production company. We were just all under the age of 22, and we were doing it, or under the age of 26. We were all students, essentially. So it was a really amazing program. Our objective, because we set out at the beginning of the class to say, what are your goals? Our goals were to broaden the conversation around the global water crisis. That was the main goal of the program. After visiting, we did realize, as a thank you, we wanted to install wells in the 2 villages that we primarily filmed in, which of course is not a long-term solution to the global water crisis, but could be for the next 10 to 15 years a Band-Aid fix. So we did make it a goal to raise $90,000. Each well was $45,000. And we were partnering with the Chris Long Foundation for this, their Water Boys initiative. And we ended up raising the money. So now we do have in Malolo and Jamita, there's a functioning well in each village, which is great. Like I said, it is a Band-Aid fix, but as of right now, they do have clean water. And, you know, we're just hoping as we spread it through film festivals and continue to share it with people, including in this group here, that we can kind of continue having this conversation and start talking about longer term solutions down the line.
Yeah, thank you so much for that background. And also like prefacing watching the film with a little bit of that insight in terms of like, you only have 2 weeks and you got to make sure you could get all the shots because you're not able to travel back. And so I think that's an interesting lens to as you're watching it, sort of thinking about those challenges. I'm going to go ahead. We're going to show the film. It's 14 minutes long. And then afterwards, just open it up for questions you may have for Mallory about the film, her current position, anything that goes into film production, and honestly, anything else we've talked about so far. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and start the recording again. So I have some questions prepared, but I've also already had the opportunity to talk to Mallory about the film pretty extensively. So I'd love to kind of open it up. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and unmute or throw them in the chat.
How did y'all get to meet these people? Like, did y'all just introduce yourselves, or what was the
Great.
story behind meeting them?
Yes, great question. So as I said, our professor Hezekiah, he is well connected everywhere, especially through the film community and also the football community. He played football at Villanova. So there's also Chris Long Foundation is who we worked with. His dad, Howie Long, played football at Villanova. So there ended up being a connection there that got the connection then to Chris Long, who works in Tanzania with this project. So he connected us, very long line of connections, I'm aware. He connected us with people on the ground who are actually implementing the wells. And there's a company, or company is the wrong word, but there's they're called World Serve. There's an organization, thank you, there's the word. There's an organization called World Serve who work with the communities on the ground to implement these wells. So through them, we were able to meet who we were going to go and meet, as in like the community leaders. But who we actually met and who we actually filmed was while we were there. We just kind of went out and we had a translator with us who would ask, like, are you willing to be filmed for this project? Would you like to tell your story? Things along those lines. And so how we actually met Adija was just by simply going to Malolo, and she was one of the women who approached us, and we ended up filming her, as you could see, for a full day. We met lots of people who lived with her, around her, her neighbors, and we also went to Jamaica and met people on the ground there as well. But essentially, Hez knew someone who connected us with World Serve, who connected us with the communities that we actually visited, Malolo and Jamaica, if that made sense.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Question. Any other questions? Mallory, I'm sort of curious. What was, you pack up, I'm sure there's a lot of planning that goes into, a trip like this and putting together the film, but what is an unexpected challenge that you faced once you landed, and kind of how were you able to overcome it and make sure that you still got the footage?
Great question. And it actually kind of links back to what we were just talking about. So one of the major challenges that we noticed when we were on the ground and actually filming is that, again, we are operating almost entirely through a translator. And how do you accurately portray exactly what people are signing up for? Because we are asking people to really talk about their lives in a very personal way. And we are essentially filming this and putting it to, who knows, anyone could really watch this film once it goes to film festivals. And it's large scale. And we actually ran into a problem where initially, we were like, okay, well, what if we just translated, that you're going to be on this video, and then they say, yeah, okay, that's totally fine with me, back. And then we were like, no, we need we need to make sure that we're telling the story that they want to be told, and that it's not us just assuming that we know that it's totally fine. So we had this whole brainstorming process of, okay, we need to get some sort of written document that explains for everything that you're saying yes to, and not just like a filmed video of them saying, oh yeah, that's totally fine, but so that this person can say, I do know what this is, and make sure that it's in Swahili or whatever language it has to be, and to make sure that we're accurately representing not only what we're doing, but what is being like that this story. And we actually had people say, you know what, I would prefer to just tell my story to you in private. And that was totally fine with us. Absolutely. Cameras off, put them away. We do not want to be filming this, and making sure that those lines are very clear. And in addition to that, as we said too, going in and not knowing exactly what you're going to be filming or who you're going to be hearing from or how this is going to play out. is a major challenge. And you have to stay up late talking about what you just saw and how you're processing it, and how we're going to take this story on in the future, and making sure that we're all understanding, what it is we're feeling, and what it is we're saying to our viewers, and things along those lines. So making sure, clear communication is a huge thing, and being willing to put in late nights and early mornings to make sure that everything is going to plan, and that you're getting the footage that you need to be successful, and also, really rounding out the project, not just, and obviously never saying like, oh, I need a shot, because that is not true to a documentary, making sure that you're there for the moments, and things along those lines. So that was a major challenge, just making sure communication is there through everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And what would you say, sort of on the flip side, what would you say was your favorite memory, or like a time that really stood out to you while you were in Tanzania?
Yeah, so there was an older woman named Bibi, who also lived in Malolo, and all the little kids loved to hang out up at her house. It was like a little bit higher on a hill, and we were always hanging out there too. And she would she would just have all like some of the moms come over, and it was just like this big one day. They were singing, and you saw a lot of dancing. There's lots of dancing and singing while we were there, and they were trying to have us dance, and I don't know how to dance at all. So we were doing like swinging each other around and stuff like that, and people were laughing at us, and then they were dancing and trying to get us to do it, and it just became this like literal dance party. And I'm fairly confident it was cameras off. Like there might be like one video from like a phone or something, but it was just like a very natural, huge gathering of us just like having a dance party in the middle of the day. And you're exhausted, like it's been a long days of filming, and then there's just this moment of like, oh, it's a dance party, I guess. Like, here's what we're doing right now. And it was just really, really fun, and like a moment where you also too, like, you really don't need a translator to say, all right, guess I'm joining this dance party. That's what we're doing right now. And it was a really fun day. And I remember thinking like, this is great. Like I'm like, I'm having a blast. So that was a really good memory,
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I love that point around like, communication being a huge barrier, but also like, here's something that we can all, contribute to without needing verbal written communication.
Absolutely. And there were tons of moments like that. But yeah, the nitty gritty, you need to be communicating with the translator and such, but there were tons of moments where it was just like, let's sit, let's have a meal together. Like, and what's being said, and you go and do that. And it was really cool. You would sit, and it was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you talked about this a little bit earlier in terms of, using the film to raise money and give back to the villages you spent time with. In terms of, I don't know, so once you came back and, I know there was a lot between when you arrived back and when the film was ready to be released, but what did that process look like? You got all of this footage, now you travel back to Villanova, and what happens then in terms of putting it all together?
Yes, and it is crazy. I think of the documentary program in three very distinct areas. So the first is before we leave, and that's like fundraising for equipment, fundraising for getting this project off the ground. And so we're reaching out to every person that we know. We're reaching out to people at Villanova, and we're like fundraising. Then we get that and we leave, and then it's filming. Like, everyone's picking up a camera, by the way. Like, even if you're not a cinematographer, like if there's a camera not being picked up, pick it up, film B-roll all the time. B-roll. That's what Hez says all the time. Can never have too much of those like moments where the grass is blowing, or like the chicks. You probably remember the chicks like eating you can never have too much of those shots. So always be filming B-roll. And then there's when we get back, and that's like go time, because you have hours and hours and hours and hours of footage. And now what do we do with them? So there's the logistical point where people are literally we called it the lab. It was like a classroom with all these like posters and film related things. And then also like computers where you are logging all of the footage So if you see, a red bucket of water, you log it as red, you log it as bucket, you log it as water. You have 3 tags on that video. So when the directors need specifically something like that, they're able to type that in and that shot will come up and maybe they'll use that one. Tons of logistical things like that. There's also, you want to make sure that all of the interviews that we've gotten are being translated accurately. So you need to find translators and you need to fund that. And then also our year, of course, COVID hit. So here we had planned this in-person premiere. We were going to sell tickets to it and everyone was going to come to a theater and watch this film. But now what are we going to do? Because there's definitely no in-person scenario. So rethinking marketing in that sense. And that's kind of where, my business background comes into play, rethinking, how do we do the social media so that we're able to release this film? And one of the things that did come from COVID is that we had made this a pay-per-view option, which actually really broadened our audience of people who were able to watch it. So now instead of just like my immediate family coming to see this in person, family who are all the way across the country are renting this film and they're able to see it too. So it actually broadened our horizons in that respect. But when you come back, it is a lot of late nights and again, early mornings in the lab. There were times that the directors just didn't even leave, the directors and editors and cinematographers, as they're in there just cut after cut after cut. Do we like this change? Do we want it to look like this? And tons of, storyboarding. So it is a lot of work when you get back, but obviously when you finally have that film finished, you hope to have that feeling of like, that's really good. And I hope others feel the same as well.
Thanks, Mel. And there's a couple questions in the chat. I don't know if you can see them.
Sure. Let me take a look. Did you have fun filming this video? Great question. I think it's a complicated answer. So there were definitely moments, as I said, that were so fun, dancing, things like that. There are also really hard moments, as you might imagine. You're hearing a lot of stories in interviews, and you're seeing a lot of things that you don't necessarily see very often here. And our professor made it a point to have us have reflection at the end of the night to kind of discuss not only, what we saw and how we're impacted by that, but also, what causes led to this and, where else is this happening and how is our film going to accurately represent that? And there are a lot of different ways that you can take on a film like this and kind of making sure that you're having those very honest conversations, especially around the things that are kind of hard to comprehend, I think was a really important part of the process and making sure that we do tell an accurate story through the film. But definitely there were moments, it was an unbelievable experience and I would do it a million times over again, but there were definitely moments of fun and then definitely moments of very hard times as well. But yes. Next question. How long did it take to produce the final film? So production wise, like post-production, when we got back from Tanzania, I think they had the final cut of the film done pretty much in March, which was a huge accelerator. Like our directors, Will and Trent, also cinematographers, Meg, they were, and of course our producers and everyone helping us with that, were really speedy. So they actually did this in a very fast timeline to get it done by March. But I would say October through March of really late nights working very, very hard, all the time in the lab, all days, all nights. They kind of covered shifts from October through March, and then we got it released by April, which was really good. What impact did the village make on you? Great question. So I think most importantly, just like everyone else, I hope gets from it, there's a conversation to be had around a global water crisis that is not just happening in Tanzania, to be clear. And I think that last shot was kind of what we were trying to say there of like, we drink water, we take water, we kind of, I don't want to say carelessly, but we use it in a way that sometimes you don't really think about how wasteful something is. So that was a major impact that I got from this trip, is even just in my own behavior and my own way, knowing what I know about this, I still, need to work on my consumption of water and how I view it and how I use it. And I think that was something that I took way ignored before I went. But in addition to that, I really think that there's something to be said, as I was saying earlier, about, connecting with people even beyond just being able to say like, hi, I'm Mallory, and it's very nice to meet everyone, but kind of connecting on a level of, you know, nonverbal, or kind of being accepted and welcomed in and asked to sit down for a meal and asked for things like that, even without being able to say that. And that ability to connect so strongly and warmly it was also really, really something that I took from that, because I do sometimes think that, you know, I'm not always welcoming in any sense, and not to say everyone is, but it was cool to kind of come in as a total stranger and still have that same warmth. What do you think the hardest and easiest part of your job? Okay, whew, good question. Let me think. Hardest is definitely logistics, in just like, as we talked about earlier, all of those things, but also like when we got back home, making sure that we do have a place to host this, and a you know, making sure that we're getting everything done on time, making sure we're raising the money post when we had decided that Wells would be a thank you gift, making sure that everyone in the class is kind of showing up, and if they're not, you know, okay, well, what's the conversation that we have around that? So as a producer, I think one of those hardest roles is even keeping yourself in check and keeping yourself on track when it comes to these big goals that we have, that, you know, even real, like, and we're a real production company. You can't have our name. Glass Rose Films is taken, but like, even like adults who have been doing this for a million years, they run into these issues as well. And you know, I was very fortunate to work with a really great team who was very driven. And Will and Trent, as I mentioned earlier, and Megan as well, they work in production now in LA, like they're doing shoots and everything. So like, I worked with a phenomenal team, and Hez, our leader in charge, he made sure we were all on track too, but definitely one of the hardest parts. The easiest part was getting to do something that I have never done before, that I knew I really loved, and like kind of having that affirmation of like, oh, I wasn't, because I think sometimes it's easy to say like, do I really love something, or do I just think it sounds cool from afar? And being able to actually participate in it and realize like production is something that is really cool to me, and media and raising money for like media campaigns and selling merchandise even, or like conceptualizing merchandise and picking a name for a film and picking a name for the company, all of those things that kind of go into being in a production company, I actually really loved, and having that affirmation of like, no, you really do love this was very rewarding for me. Out of all the places I've been to, what is my favorite? That is an excellent question, and I don't know that I have an answer for you. I've traveled a lot. I went abroad twice. I think you mentioned that earlier, for like semester long. So I do think that the places that I went to abroad wise have a soft spot in my heart, just because, you know, I kind of became like used to it. It was a little bit like a place away from home. The most rewarding experience I had was certainly Tanzania. And one of the most hard experiences, physically wise and emotionally wise also. So that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know that. I'm gonna say I have many answers for that, and I think that the answer would change any day. Where have you traveled to? Ellen, you're hitting me. Okay, so
abroad. You
yes.
mentioned your semester abroad. So
yes. So I went to London originally, which was a really cool place to go. I was only there for 2 months, but it was a really rewarding experience. It was like a weird study program where you could do like one class during the summer, and then you had like an internship on the other side. And then I did spend a full semester in Copenhagen, Denmark, which was really cool as well. Very different there. Everyone's biking, and I wasn't even very good at biking before I left, but they're very big on biking there, so that was a big adjustment. It was like actual traffic but for bikes, so huge adjustment there, but very, very cool experience as well. What is something you learned through this experience that would be good advice? Excellent question. Wow, you guys are coming at it with really good questions. The first thing I would say is I was really nervous to join the program in general, because they've experienced so much success. 2 years before us, the student production film won a Student Academy Award for Sankofa, their film Sankofa. So it's a very successful program, and I was worried that I was kind of coming in with like a lack of knowledge, or would I be able to do that? Every once in a while you get those what ifs in your head. And I think the biggest thing I learned from this is kind of just, and I said this in the beginning, like kind of just go for it. I didn't even sign up for producer when I first joined. I signed up for multimedia producer, which I still kind of am, which is mainly the social media platforms. I had never really done sound before in my life, but when you're on the ground and you need someone to run sound, then you put the headphones on, you get the boom up and you do it. So I think the biggest thing I learned is definitely the biggest thing I personally learned that I could offer as advice would be, even if there are moments that you think like, I really, really enjoy the idea of this, but I'm a little worried that maybe I'm not cut out for it, or it'll be too hard or something along those lines. I think sometimes that's just like a little voice in our head meant to kind of like throw us off our game, and to do your best to ignore that and just try for it. Because had I said no to this, I think I would be missing something that was really, really important to me, and kind of even affirmed what I'm doing now in my job and what I picture myself doing 10 years down the line, if that makes sense. So I think my best advice would be to just kind of, and I know that sounds a little cheesy, but try to ignore that voice that's like, what if, or maybe I shouldn't, and go for it.
Thanks, Mal. And I know we are right at time, but thank you for talking us through your experiences, and for our students on the call. I know Mallory has mentioned it, but these topics that we've talked about, this film, these different clubs she's been a part of, her semesters abroad, those were all opportunities she had at her college through student-run organizations, classes, fully funded opportunities that she was able to find that helped her sort of explore interests and find where her interests fit in media and in production, and currently at NBC. So certainly appreciate you breaking that down for us. Sharing your film with us is beautiful. I watched it several times and could watch it several more. But thank you so much. We'll put the recording up on YouTube probably tomorrow. But I hope everybody has a good rest of their night. And thank you again, Mallory.
Yes, of course. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you.